Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Farrah, and in today's video I'm going to be doing my June reading wrap-up. So this is going to be a combination with May. I didn't end up filming a May wrap-up because I was so busy I only finished one book, so I figured I would add it on to May. And even with June, or I would add it into June, and even with June, I read a few books, but it wasn't like the busiest reading month. But anyway, let's get started. I'm going to keep most of these pretty short because I just did a vlog where I kind of did a wrap up of all these books, like in more detail. So it's going to be a little bit shorter than what I usually do. Another thing I just want to say, you guys, is thank you so much for subscribing and supporting my channel. I recently passed over the 1,000 subscriber mark, which is so amazing. It feels like such a huge accomplishment for me. So I'm just really thankful for all of you, those of you that have been with me like way when I did my 100 subscriber thank you video all the way up to now. So thank you so much for all of you that have taken time to watch my videos and leave me a comment. I really appreciate it so much, and thank you. I am going to be doing like a I don't think I'm going to do a Q&A, but I'm going to do like the 25 questions to get to know me tag. So that'll be coming up soon, but I just want to say thank you in this video. So anyway, let's get started with the books. I have, I don't know, maybe 6 books to talk about. My reading went pretty well. I didn't have any 5-star books for this time period, but I had a couple 4.5, and most of them were like in the 4-star range. So let's get started. First book I read and finished was The Girl Who Fell from the Sky by Heidi Durrow. This is a pretty short book. I would say it's like not quite lit fic. It's more just general fiction, a little bit historical. Does it maybe take place in the 80s? I can't honestly, I feel like it's been forever since I read this, but it was pretty good. This book tells the story of this young girl. She starts out about maybe 8 years old when the book opens, and she's biracial. She has a black father and a white mother. Her mother is from Denmark and her dad is from the US, and they met during while her dad was overseas. And they had her and her siblings. So they moved to the United States, and a tragic event happens where the main character now, her name is Rachel, she's now living with her grandmother and her aunt in Seattle in a mostly black community. So she grew up more around white people. She was growing up in Denmark, and now she's kind of switching over and she's living with her dad's mom. So it's kind of a mixture of things. It's a story about her and her kind of coming to terms with her identity and, you know, like just trying to be accepted within the black community. Her appearance is quite different looking. She's very light skinned and she has blue eyes, but she has very curly and textured hair. So it does talk about people pointing these things out to her all the time, like, oh, you have the most beautiful blue eyes, and oh, why does your hair look like that, or what are you, you know? So she's kind of dealing with that at a young age where she's never really dealt with that before. And she's also feeling sort of like a lack within herself of being black enough to be accepted with her family and friends at her new school. But there's also kind of this mystery going on, like, what happened to this family, like what this tragic event, which I don't want to mention in case anyone wants to read it, but how did it happen? Like, was it foul play? Was it have to do with the mother's mental health? So it was a pretty interesting book. I really liked the writing. It was very fast paced. Chapters flew by and I really enjoyed it. I think I gave it like between a 3.5 and a 4. There was just something lacking, I would say. I felt like the writing did capture the essence of a kid in the beginning, and as we grow up, I think the novel ends, she's around 16, so we do get some time passage through there, and I felt like the author did a really good job of making you believe that it was a kid's dialogue or a kid's inner dialogue, so I thought that was great. I just think maybe there wasn't enough depth to Rachel. I did enjoy it, and it was a book off of my shelf that I got to, which I am happy about. So the next book off my shelf I got to in June is Spring, and this is the anthology For the Changing Seasons, edited by Marissa Harrison. And this book I really enjoyed. This is a nonfiction collection of different nature essays, and it's compiled from different pieces of writing through a pretty big span of time. So we're getting some pieces from the 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, and present day. So we have a combination of different pieces of writing from current authors in the UK, current writers, nature writers. We're getting journal entries from naturalists, and we're also getting excerpts from different classic novels that depict spring in some of their scenes. So for example, there's an excerpt from Jane Eyre in here. I think Charles Dickens might be in this. And this is put together or sponsored by the Wildlife Trust in the UK. So it's meant to kind of depict spring in the UK, which is very similar to the climate that I live in here. So I didn't really find that to be that much different. But I really enjoyed it. I read this in the morning before work when I sat on my porch in the sun, and I could hear the birds and I can see the chipmunks, you know, climbing up the trees. So it felt it really put me in a nice mood after such a long winter. There was a lot of focus about birds. I thought the writing was great. Obviously there's a few pieces that were a little bit better than others, but for the most part, I really enjoyed almost everything in this book. So I've already picked up and started the summer book, which is here. And I'm gonna just read a little bit each month until I get through September. And then I have the autumn book, which I'm gonna read, and then winter. So it's just been fun. And each book has like a little section where they feature the different authors or the different writers so that you can read about their bios and you can pick up more works if you like their particular writing. So I'm just loving this series. I bought this series on a whim. It was one of those Amazon suggestions and I'm really enjoying it so far. So I'm looking forward to working my way through summer now that we're in July. And yeah, so I think I gave that about 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. Another book I read for the month of June is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban by J.K. Rowling. And, you know, I'm sure most of you are familiar with this book, so I'm not going to get too much into it, but I really enjoyed the writing. I enjoyed the different plots within the book and the different directions that the characters took and the relationships and the conflicts. I just love the world of Harry Potter. I love the world building, and it was nice to get a little bit extra with the book. I've never read the books before, so I'm working my way through them, but I have seen the movies and I'm very familiar with the story. But it was fun because it's almost like reading the book for the first time. I do feel like I got a little more depth. You know, you're getting into the minds of the characters a little bit more. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. If I had one critique, well, if I had 2 critiques, I would say that I do sometimes have a problem with how J.K. Rowling depicts stereotypes in the villains or the bad guys. She tends to make them all like have very stereotypical features or physical appearances, which is, you know, it is what it is, but it is something that I notice. And then the other thing is that the way the book starts with Harry and his horrible family, it felt a little repetitive. I know there were different things that happened and it sort of is building each time within each book how he deals with the family. It did kind of feel like, okay, he's back with his awful family and they're treating him like garbage. So I don't know, that was my only critique, but otherwise I really enjoyed this. I'm looking forward to book 4, which I probably will start sometime in the fall. So yeah, this was a fun one. Next, I listened to an audiobook, and this one was called, don't be alarmed by the title, but it was called Killing Jesus by Bill O'Reilly. And this book I happened to come across at the library, and it's kind of significant because I'm also reading the Bible for the greatest books of all time reading list that I'm working off of. And so I'm in the New Testament now. So I'm reading through the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John and following Jesus's life. And I've just been diving into that a little bit and the history of all that. So this is called Killing Jesus, A History. And it's a book that Bill O'Reilly, and there's another author that worked on this with him, put together. They tried to sort of make it as a history book about Jesus the man, Jesus of Nazareth, who lived during this time, you know, close to Caesar and Cleopatra's era, like 30 years after them. And they tried to kind of separate some of the mythology out of it and just focus on the evidence and texts that we have of Jesus and what his life was and what his mission was and what he was doing and you know, what happened afterwards. So I really, really enjoyed this. This was a great audiobook experience. It was read by Bill O'Reilly. And after I read it, I found out all this like crappy stuff that he's done. And, you know, there's that whole like cancel culture, but for whatever reason, Bill O'Reilly's not the best person in the world presumably, maybe. But it was a great book. I did find it extremely interesting. The person of Jesus is just such a fascinating, one of the most famous people in history, very well loved, very, really, really well loved. But it was nice to see this portrayal of him without the mythology part and just focus on like what his life was. If he would, if you were to be a complete atheist and not believe in organized religion and everything like that, or Christianity, it was interesting just to read this account of his life and what he's done. And of course, a lot of this was taken from the Bible because there isn't a ton of documented evidence of his existence. But it did feel nice to read it in this sort of linear novelized version as opposed to reading it the way the Bible is constructed. So I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. If I had one critique, it would just be that it was sort of made you lead to believe that there was going to be more of historical elements in it, but it did feel very much mirroring the Bible. So I don't know, whatever, it is what it is. If you love Jesus and you're interested in reading a book like that, I highly recommend it. It was great. Then I also picked up and DNF'd my book for Historathon Quarter 2, and that was called Women in the Middle Ages by Frances and someone else, Gies. Maybe it's her husband, Michael, maybe. And this really had no particular reason that I DNF'd it. It wasn't because it was a bad book. It wasn't because the writing was bad. It was just a mood thing. I started it and I just could not get into it. It seemed like it was going to be pretty interesting, but I just wasn't really in the mood. We're reading a little bit about how women were treated back then, and sometimes I just don't want to know anymore. I just want to move forward. So unfortunately, I didn't get to any books for Historathon Quarter 2. We'll see about Quarter 3. I'm not totally sure yet. I'm just trying to mood read my little heart out for now. So that was my DNF, or my one that I decided not to finish. And then I also read another book called Small Things Like These. This was my ebook, and this was by Keegan. This was my first book by this author, and it was really good. It was really good. It was quite short. It was a novella, and I heard about this book from Flossie at the Grape Jelly Library. I remember she either did a community post or a video about it, and she really recommended it. So I had it in my holds, and I finally decided to read it. So this book, this is the one that takes place in the 80s, I think, but it follows this man it takes place in Ireland, and it follows this man who's, goes to work every day, works a job. He has a couple daughters. He loves his family, and he comes across a situation that he just does not feel is right. And they're living in a town that's very dominated by the Catholic religion, and it's, the Catholic religion was quite powerful, and to go against the religion wasn't really heard of. And it was something that the Catholic religion was kind of sweeping under the door. Felt a lot of like hypocrisy in there, and it's just kind of like I mentioned this in my blog, but it felt like the story of just this one guy, average day guy, who does the right thing, like an unsung hero. And it was just really well structured. The writing was beautiful. The prose just flowed. It was just a really beautiful book. And I really enjoyed it. And I'm interested in trying out more from Keegan. I know Erin from Erin Reads Book recommended one. So if anybody has enjoyed this author before, let me know what your favorite books are by her, because I really liked her writing. So that was that one. And finally, I got to my second book in the High Republic series called The Rising Storm. Yeah, The Rising Storm by Cavan Scott. And I actually did this as a read-along with audio. And this finally pulled me out of my audiobook slump. I actually read this before Killing Jesus. So I had been in an audiobook slump for a couple months before this, and I just couldn't get into it. I couldn't focus on them. I was like not in the mood. But with this, the audiobook narrator's name is Mark Thompson. I think it's Thompson. And he did such a great job. A phenomenal voice actor. There were sound effects. It was fully dramatized. So we're getting lightsaber noises. We're getting the theme music from Star Wars, John Williams, like the Skywalker theme. It was just so fun. And I know there's a lot of controversy between Legends versus canon, and a lot of people aren't happy with what Disney has done to Star Wars, which I completely understand. The only reason I don't mind it is because my little daughter, when she was like 6 or 7, when the new movies came out with Rey, and it was like, oh, she was obsessed, and it was so cute. She had the costume. We were so into it. So I will always have a special place for that in my heart. But anyway, The High Republic is a series that came out in 2021, and it has a whole bunch of books and graphic novels, YA, middle grade, adult novels. This is one of the adult novels. And I'm not going to get into the plot at all, but I'll just tell you that I really enjoyed it. It was a solid book for a second book. And I really liked being back in this world. I'm really enjoying the new characters. It's a focus on the Jedi, and they have all these interesting flaws, and the villain has some interesting depth to it, and it was just a really fun read. I actually went back when I was done with this, and I listened to the audio version of book 1, which is called Light of the Jedi. Originally, I had just physically read that, and it was a little confusing. I still enjoyed it, but I was just like, who are these people and what's happening? But now I'm here, and I'm in the world, and I'm enjoying it. So I did pick up, for my digital book, next I did pick up one of the young adults, it's either young adult or middle grade books called A Test of Courage. So I am going to continue with this world and just enjoy myself with it. Of course, I should be doing Star Trek books for Book Trek, but I haven't come across any yet well, I don't own any, and I'm really trying to read off my shelf. So I had a very successful reading month in terms of getting to what I own, which was great. And now I'm going to be focusing on my big books of summer and just trying to get through those big chunky ones. I'm still going to get an audiobook to fill that time, and a book to read on my e-reader. So that's it for my wrap up. Please let me know if you guys have read any of these books before. If you did, I hope you enjoyed them. I wanted to say thank you again for watching. Thank you for 1,000 subscribers, and I will talk to you guys soon. Hope you're having a great day, and thanks again.